G'day everyone. Just a couple of people have been asking about these questions, which I did quickly in class, but I'll spend a bit more time on there about the domains of various functions when you've got a function inside a function, so the FG function. So I'm just going to go crack straight into an example just to sort of show this. So something like this. So they're in your textbook. So given that the domain of sine is negative pi and 2 to pi and 2, and the domain of cos is 0 to pi. I might not write it out. The domains are restricted to that, and what we're trying to do is find the implied domain and range of the following. So I'll just write find implied domain and range of, and I'll just grab one. So let's do this one. Y equals cos, sorry, I'm just copying it, 2 sine negative 1 x. Okay, so let's find the implied domain and range of this guy here. It's important to draw the graphs first to sort of get a look at it. Sometimes I try to sneak through without doing the graph, and usually I'm okay, but it's good to be able to see what's going on. So let's just have a look at the two graphs side by side, and then we can sort of analyse what's going on. So firstly we have we've got an inside function and an outside function. So let's just draw our inside function. So 2 sine negative 1x. The sine negative 1x goes like this, but the 2 will double its height, so it will sort of go up and like that. It's not very good, it doesn't matter, but it will go twice as high. So instead of going to pi on 2, it will go up to pi, and instead of going down to negative pi on 2, it will go to negative pi. It still goes from 1 to negative 1 like that. So that's just sine negative 1x. Sorry, 2 sine negative. I'm just being very brief here. And the other function is cos, and it's restricted to 0 to pi, so it just looks like that. Okay, so there's pi there, 1, negative 1. Okay, so just looking at these two functions, we need to see where this thing is defined. So where will y be defined? And what you need to remember is that we need to find where the inside function is defined, and also where the range of the inside function is defined, and where the domain of the outside function. And just to put down here, with these types of questions, you need to find the intersection of the range of the inside function with the domain of the outside function. And I'll just explain that, the outside function. So what that means is that looking at this, for this to be defined, firstly the domain of the outside, so if that was cos x, whatever this stuff is, that the domain of the inside, that needs to be intersecting with, that needs to be defined in the same places that the range of the inside, it needs to be where they cross over. So let's have a look at this. Okay, so let's I'll do it green. I'll try to fit all this in one spot. So firstly, let's have a look at what I've just written, the range of the inside function. So firstly, the range of the inside function. The inside function is 2 sine negative 1x. So the range of 2 sine negative 1x is, so let's just have a look at the graph, it goes from negative pi to pi. Negative pi to pi. Okay, so that's the range. And what's the domain of the outside function? So the domain of our outside function here, which is cos x, is, and we were told that cos has been restricted to 0 to pi. Okay, so there's our two sort of regions, and what we need to do is find where those two intersect. In other words, where do they overlap? Where are they both defined for? Because otherwise, if they're not both defined, then the function isn't defined. And so therefore, what we want to do is restrict. You can see here, the range of 2 sine negative 1x is from negative pi to pi. The domain of cos is from 0 to pi. So where do they overlap? What we want to do is restrict both of these things to where they overlap. In other words, to 0 to pi. So let's restrict the range of 2 sine negative 1x to, where do they overlap? From 0 to pi. That's where those two things are both defined. And this is the same thing as restricting the domain of cos x to 0 to pi. It's the same thing, and we just need to be aware that that's doing both those two things. Okay, fantastic. So I've restricted the range of 2 sine negative 1 to x to that. Am I going to fit this in? I'll go back to black. So if the range of 2 sine negative 1x is between 0 and pi, so therefore 2 sine negative 1x is between the values of pi and 0. So we've got a function between that. That's the range of values that we get. Then we just need to solve this for x, and that'll give us the domain of the whole function. So divide everything by 2, so you get sine negative 1x pi on 2 to 0. And then take the sine of everything, so you get, what's sine at pi on 2? Sine at pi on 2 is equal to 1. What's the sine at 0? That's 0. And so x, the range of x that you get is that we get the domain of y. So that was the function that we had, y equals this up here. So finally the domain is from 0 to 1. Okay, now, does that sort of make sense? I'll just go back through that again. We've found the restriction for the range of the inside because we needed to restrict it so that it's defined. Once we've restricted that, we know that the values of 2 sine negative 1x go from 0 to pi, and that's what we've written here. Then we solve for x. That gives us our values of x that make this function defined. And so the domain of our function y is from 0 to 1. Let's just go back to our graphs now so that we can see it clearly. What we've done is restrict the range of 2 sine negative 1x from 0 to pi. In other words, we're looking at this here. Okay, just that section there. We've also restricted the domain of cos x from 0 to pi. In other words, we haven't actually restricted it at all. We're using the whole thing of what we were given. So this is what we're talking about here. So let's just have a look at it. We could have made a shortcut, and this is what I often do, and I think I did this in class, that's why I confuse people. But the domain of y, our outside function here, cos x, where will this be defined for? So the x values will go from 0 to 1. Okay, so if here, looking at 2 sine negative 1x, it's defined the x values from 0 to 1 here. You can see that that's the x values 0 to 1. I've used algebra here, but you can also just look at the graph. Okay, so looking at this, if our x values are defined from 0 to 1, what will our other values be? So looking at our outside function, we've got the domain, so x goes from 0 to 1. What will the range of y be? The range of y will come from this function here. So when 2 sine negative 1x ranges between 0 to 1, that gives us the values here between 0 and 1. And what will they be? It gives us the whole function, and that's defined from negative 1 into 1. And so you need to be looking at the graphs and understanding what each part does. A lot of this is math methods type stuff. I hope that makes sense. I might just do one more video and a different type of example, so hang on for that one there.